Good evening, everybody. It's Ellen Lewis from Crazy for You. And I'm so happy that you're here. This is the Crazy for You podcast. I'm here every Wednesday at 7 o'clock. Sometimes we do it from the shop with Ginny and me, or we'll have some other guests like we did last week and we will next week. And sometimes I come to you solo because I want to talk about a particular topic or share something with you that's more technical, and I want to be able to better share my screen. So I hope they're both fun for you. So tonight our topic is about substituting yarn. So I can't wait to get into that. Hi, Rita. I'm happy you're here. So this is February, and all month I've been kind of talking about love themes. You know, we did self-love, and we talked about Brandon Mabley's new present, his collection for Rowan, the I Am. And last week, Ginny and Mary and I talked about how a knitting project is like a marriage. And then if you read the newsletter yesterday, you saw that I was talking about, when to break up with your project. That was kind of fun. Tell me if you read that in the comments. I would be interested to know what you thought. Hey, Jal. Hi, Carolyn, Gail, Meredith. Oh, my goodness. Nice to see you. Hi, Eveline. Oh, so good to have you here. So if you read in the newsletter, I talked about, when it's time to break up with your yarn, because sometimes a yarn that you've chosen for your project, it just isn't going to work. It doesn't matter how hard you try, or, how you stick it out, or how you try to be flexible. It just is not right. So tonight, what I thought, rather than kind of hashing through that again, I would talk about some of the things that we can avoid doing to keep us from a situation where we have to break up with somebody. Some of these red flags are these things that keep us, that put us in a situation where we're about to make a big mistake. And they're really kind of simple things. But we don't always think about them. So I have three big ones, and I just want to go through those with you. So I would also be interested, go ahead and tell me in the comments if there's anything that you've learned, any lessons that you've learned when choosing yarn that you think are special, that have helped you over the years come to make better decisions about your yarn. And then we'll go through that kind of as we go. Hi, Karen. Hey, Polly. Hey, Meredith. Jenna, nice to see you. Bar, I keep wondering where you are, girl. Gotta come see me. Okay, so it seems like you enjoyed the the newsletter article. I had fun writing it. It was a little bit personal, but it's okay. That's who I am. So 3 things that you are mistakes that you might make when you are choosing your yarn. And the first one is looking only at the gauge of the pattern and the yarn. Okay, I'm going to show you an example, and I'm going to share my screen to do it. So here we go. Okay, so the first one, let's take this sweater. This is a super cute sweater by Wool Addicts, and we had this yarn in the shop, Trust. It's a beautiful yarn, a beautiful sweater. Isn't that cute? I've had that on my list to make for forever, and I actually pulled gray yarn to make it. So when you look at this pattern, you can see that it's a super bulky yarn, and the gauge for this pattern is 11 stitches over 4 inches, right? Super bulky yarn. So you might be tempted to say, wow, well, the store where I am, they don't carry Trust, or I don't really like the colors that Trust comes in, or I wanted a variegated, or I don't like this yarn, whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons that we don't like a particular yarn that the pattern recommends. It happens all the time. Here's a picture of the yarn just so you can see it. So it's a boucle. I mean, it's super bulky. It's super, super hard to see your stitches. So if you don't love it, I totally get it. But you see, it's a recommended gauge right there, 11 stitches to 4 inches, right? So you don't like that yarn, but you're looking around, you want to find something else. So you start looking in the bulky category, and there's no shortage of bulky yarns, right? I want to be able to see you guys. So I'm going to do this. Can you still see that? Okay, cool. Hey, Christy. Hey, Gwen. Hi, Jane. Okay, so you start looking around in the bulky section of the store. You ask the store owner, hey, where's the bulky section? Where can I find a yarn that knits at 11 stitches to 4 inches? And you know that this is huge, so you're looking for huge something. And your eye falls on this. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful yarn, hand-dyed by a small company, Pancake and Lulu, right? Isn't that a pretty color? It's just gorgeous. You can see that close up. Let's look at it full screen. It's like yarn porn, right? Super pretty yarn. Comes in great colors, right? And lo and behold, the gauge. 11 to 13 stitches is 4 inches. Wow, awesome. Okay. So you think, all right, let's get this yarn. Absolutely. Works perfectly, right? 11 stitches to 4 inches. Trust is 11 stitches to 4 inches. My project is 11 stitches to 4 inches. I'm golden, right? Not so fast. When you actually get that yarn together, what you're going to find out is that, yes, trust is 11 stitches to 4 inches. Let's look at this again. Maybe here. Yeah. Okay. Trust is 11 stitches to 4 inches, 82 yards. Okay. 82 yards. Wait a minute. What about 82 yards? Yeah, I'm good, right? I'm good. 82 yards. For my pattern, I'm going to make the small medium. It takes 10 balls. Okay. So 82 yards of trust, 82 yards of Pancake and Lulu single bulky. Fabulous, right? I'm golden. It's going to be gorgeous. So the question is, will it work? Yeah, absolutely. It will work. You've got gauge on that. Okay. 11 stitches over 4 inches in both yarns. It will absolutely work. But what you need to remember, and probably didn't think about, maybe you did if you're a more experienced knitter, is that trust has 82 yards in 50 grams. Okay. This bulky yarn, this bulky single ply has 82 yards in 100 grams. Okay. So what that means overall is the trust is lighter. It's much, much lighter and what we call loftier. It's kind of brushed. It's kind of poofy. It makes a big gauge, but it's not a heavy yarn. There's a lot of air in that 11 stitches over 4 inches. Whereas when you have that real bulky yarn, that's a plied yarn. It's fairly tight, reasonably tightly twisted for a single ply, as tightly as a single ply can be twisted without being over plied. So I just did the math, and so 10 skeins of the trust is going to be 471 grams, which is just over a pound. Okay, 16 ounces. You make that same sweater in that beautiful hand-dyed single ply from Lulu. It's going to weigh 2.2 pounds. So it's going to be twice as heavy on your body. And it's going to have a really different feel. Does that matter? No, you can knit your sweater, right? You can knit it out of anything you want. But this is just something to remember, that it's going to have a very different feel in the wearing. Do you see what I'm saying? So I think that's kind of one of the most important things to look at is how much per yard does your yarn weigh? If you're going to substitute a yarn and you want to have the same effect. So part of the appeal of this sweater, when you see it, it looks so light and lofty. Let me show you that again. So it's a beautiful kind of light. Do you see how those sleeves, it kind of drapes a little bit, for a bulky yarn to drape like that, but it looks and feels light on the body, right? Nobody wants to wear things that feel heavy. So that's part of the appeal, I think, for this garment, is that it's light and lofty, and that's not what you're going to get, even though this yarn is beautiful and you can get gauge with it. Does that make sense? So I think it really kind of came to light when we were doing the No Plain Jane cardigan. I have it back here. I'm not going to turn around too fast because I have vertigo. But this is a beautiful cardigan that we did a couple years ago when Wool Addicts first came out. It's knit in a yarn called Air, which is 135 yards for 50 grams, and it's a bulky weight. And there were a lot of people who were looking at another yarn by the same company called Earth, also a bulky yarn, same yardage, but it weighed 100 grams, right? So it's just important to know. And it's especially important when you're talking about a big garment. This is a long garment. This comes down below my my rear end, just to the top of my thighs. So the more fabric there is, the more the weight starts to kind of be an issue for you. So it's just something to think about, how that's going to feel when you wear it and how it's going to hang. It's going to start to get very, very heavy when you're talking about a big garment. All right, Jane. I've learned that even though you can meet gauge, yes, exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. Absolutely. Even though you can meet gauge, it doesn't mean that it's going to be right for you. When the yarn is same as on the pattern, it's easier to know that that will work. Yeah, it absolutely is easier to know that that will work, but sometimes you just can't get that yarn for whatever reason. It's been discontinued, it's not available, it's outside your budget, you don't like the colors that it comes in. Some yarns come in, most yarns. I mean, that's the thing about Yarn Store Yarn, is it's in the fashion chain. It's in the fashion business chain. And the colors that come are, going to be the ones that are in style. And maybe you want a color that's a little brighter or just a little off. It's not, it's not going to be available. So it's nice to know how to shift yarns, how to substitute. So that's one big mistake. And it is to look only at the gauge and not consider the other factors. All right. So Morgan, are you ever going to do a No Plain Jane knit along again? It's a great sweater. Sweetie, you're in the membership club. You don't need a knit along to do that. If you want to knit that sweater, just, let's just do it and bring it to the magic table or bring it wherever. And I'll be happy to help you with it all the way along. We can do that. And if you want to start a knit along for it, we can absolutely do that for you. You can do it. Put it in circle and see if anybody else is interested. I know Chris is doing that already. She's doing the No Plain Jane. So it's a great sweater. And I've been thinking about bringing the Air back anyway. It's really beautiful. And the Wool Addicts colors for spring are just really yummy. So it's a thought. Okay. So that was the first thing. Okay. The other thing, the next thing I wanted to talk about is not paying attention to the original yarn's construction and elasticity. So, we've spent a lot of time over the past year, 2 years, living in yoga pants and slouchy sweaters. But the truth is that once upon a time, sweaters were often work, office wear. You would wear a structured cardigan to the office instead of a woven jacket or something like that. And if you wanted to knit a jacket like that, you would need to have a garment that had a lot of structure, right? So if you picked a garment or a pattern that was knit with a lot of structure, a yarn that had a lot of structure, and you tried to substitute for it a yarn that didn't have enough structure, you would be very sorry, because you can't knit structure. You can only knit so much structure into a garment, right? So some of the kinds of things that you want to know is that generally wool has more structure than plant. I have a whole list of these. I should probably put them in the thing. Wool has more structure than plant-based fibers. Plied yarns have more structure than single ply yarns. Chunky yarns have more structure than finer yarns. And what are some fibers that don't have a lot of structure? So we call these drapey yarns. So alpaca, you all know that alpaca doesn't have a lot of structure, and it will lose its shape. You know, beautiful hats made of 100% alpaca tend to kind of go limp or stretch out. They don't have the same elasticity and resilience. Alpaca, rayon, viscose, all of those have a tendency to stretch out and to be a little bit floppy. Drapey is the word that we use to describe those yarns when we like what they're doing, and floppy is the word we use to describe those yarns when we don't like what they're doing. So elasticity is a characteristic that you want to consider when you're choosing a yarn for a project. So looking at the yarn that was the original yarn that was suggested. So that takes me to my next point. Looking only at gauge. Where am I? Okay. So a yarn's construction, when you look at a pattern and you want to change the, yeah, sorry, I'm a little bit woozy today. When you have a pattern that you're looking at and you are not going to use that yarn in your project, it's really important that you look at the gauge of the yarn that was used in the pattern. So what I'm trying to say is, a lot of times a pattern will have a gauge that's different in the pattern than the recommended gauge from the ball band. I have an example here. So let me bring this up. So for instance, if you look at a pattern like this is a beautiful design by Kim Hargreaves. It's called Free. And it is knit using a DK weight yarn and a strand of Kid Silk Haze. Really, really pretty garment. Okay, here's another example. This one is my favorite. This is Stroll. Same thing. It's knit with a DK weight yarn and a strand of Kid Silk Haze. But if you look at the pattern information, you can see that the gauge of this garment is 13 stitches in 4 inches. So you might be tempted to go and look for a yarn that knits at 13 stitches to 4 inches. Again, you would get an extremely different fabric than the one you see here. What is appealing about this, I think in large part, is the incredible drape that you get from working a finer yarn at a larger gauge. You get a different looking fabric, you get a different feeling fabric. It's very, very soft, and it has, kind of a relaxed look. If you went to the store and you bought a yarn with a native gauge of 13 stitches over 4 inches, it would be much bulkier. So think about how thick a bulky yarn fabric is. Okay, it has not only that width associated with the the thickness of the yarn, but it has its own thickness because the yarn itself is thick. When you take a fine yarn and you knit it at a larger gauge, you get a fine fabric, because the yarn itself is thin. So the fabric is thinner than the gauge that the pattern is written in would lead you to believe. So anytime you're going to make a pattern and the yarn is specified, look at the gauge of the yarn that's recommended for the pattern. Designers don't always use the gauge that's recommended on the ball band for their garment. They do it for a lot of reasons, to get additional drape, to get a certain look. They may want that lightweight, fine fabric. They may want it to be loose and open. And that's totally fine. It's probably part of what attracted you to that garment in the first place. So it's important that you respect, if you like and trust the designer, that you respect what they have done in creating the fabric that makes that garment so appealing to you. So part of what makes this particular pattern work, even though they've what I call pushed the gauge. So that's a term. Pushing the gauge is a term that I use and a lot of people use to refer to the fact that it's a finer yarn knit on a bigger needle. A lot of times, if you knit a finer yarn on a bigger needle, you're just going to get a floppy fabric because it doesn't have the structural integrity that it needs. It just doesn't have the recovery or the elasticity. But this particular garment is made with soft yak DK, which you may know if you've ever worked with it. Soft yak DK is a chainette construction. It's cotton. It's, I think, 85% cotton and 15% yak. So both of those are very inelastic fibers. The cotton because it's plant-based and it doesn't have a lot of elasticity, and yak because it's one of those fibers that's prized for its softness rather than its elasticity. So you put those together and you're thinking, oh my goodness, we have an extremely inelastic fiber. But soft yak DK is actually made with a chainette construction. I'm going to see if I don't have my camera up, but I'm going to see if I can get this to show for you whether you can see this against, but you know what a chainette construction looks like, right? Can you see that? Probably not. But anyway, so it's really bouncy. Can you see how bouncy that yarn is? I mean, super, super bouncy, much bouncier than you would expect for a cotton and yak. So when you have a bouncy yarn like that, it gives a lot of recovery. So even though you've knit it at a loose gauge, it's still going to hold its shape. It's not just going to, flop apart. Not that all yarns are going to flop apart, but there is a tendency when you push the gauge for the yarn to not for the fabric not to have the integrity that you might expect. But this one does because of the construction of the yarn. So that's the second point that I want to make, is that you always want to consider the yarn that is recommended in the pattern. Even if you're not going to use that yarn, find out what it is so that you can duplicate that yarn as best you can, rather than just looking at the gauge. The gauge is important, make no mistake. It's essential. But the yarn that is used to get that gauge and is knit at that gauge is an equally important aspect to success and not having to break up with your yarn. Thank you, Mary. I'm glad you could see the chain. Thank you for letting me know. It's very hard to tell sometimes what the camera is able to pick up. I normally like having my small camera so I can show you guys close-ups, but there wasn't enough of that to show today. So, all right. So, gauge. What else is in here? All right. So again, not paying enough attention to the original gauge's structure. So I was talking a little bit about, the native characteristic of yarn. Honestly, when you look at something like the soft yak DK, which is a cotton and a yak blend, and it's all that elastic, all of those kinds of things that we might say about cotton yarn or plant-based yarns or wool yarns or, silk yarns or all of that. It's much harder nowadays with the way the modern construction methods for yarns that are it's much harder to make generalizations about yarns anymore. It's almost impossible to say plant-based yarns don't have elasticity, wool yarns are this, or heavy, light, whatever. You really do have to look at each individual construction of the yarn before you make your decision. So playing into that is, these modern constructions that I talk about, that chainette construction that I showed in the soft yak DK allows yarns to have a great deal of, that kind of recovery. Another modern construction that you will sometimes see is the tube construction. We talked about this a lot last week. Mary was in love with that right off. And, Ginny and I took a little bit of time to get used to that. But another characteristic of it is that it's very light, and it's one of those yarns like the trust that gives you a lot of yardage and a reasonably large gauge for a very light weight, and it throws off all of the yardage gauge kinds of assumptions that you might make, right? So I think that's important to remember. I had something up here oh, yes. Okay. So I wanted to show you. So most of the time we like yarns that have a great deal of recovery and elasticity. They're more fun to knit with. They tend to hold their shape better. But when you are looking for the yarn to do a particular thing, okay, sometimes there's just no substitute. We can knit things at a looser gauge, or we can, knit lighter yarns, but you sometimes really do have to pay attention to exactly the yarn fiber that's being recommended in the pattern. And this is an example from a sweater that we did in a knit along a couple years ago. Super cute pattern. It's now a free pattern. It's called the cowl shell. And you can see this beautiful drape in the neckline. It doesn't matter what you use to make this yarn, so long as it has very little structure. We talked about wool having structure and, chainette yarns having structure and plied yarns having structure. What you want for a garment like this is, if you see this kind of drape, you're going to want a garment that doesn't spring back. You're going to want something like a rayon or a viscose, or a silk, or a fine cotton that just is going to give you that beautiful kind of drape. Let's see what else we got up there. Isn't that pretty? So she's given a lot of information in the pattern about the gauge before and after washing. But I think just sort of, if you don't pay attention to the characteristics of the garment, if you see a garment with a lot of drape, you know that you really need to get a yarn that's going to be able to support that, a yarn that is not as structured as others. So like I said, rayon, and by the way, whether it's bamboo or viscose or milk or sea cell or any of that stuff, it's all rayon, okay? It all behaves the same way. It's just very drapey. If you don't like that, again, it's limp. If you do like that, it's drapey. But, there isn't just one yarn for any pattern. Wanted to share with you this. Did I have that? Yes. Okay. So I wanted to share with you this, which I think is a really gorgeous pattern. It's called the Magnolia Bloom. And she has done this in, it's a kind of a bulky weight. She's got it at 12 stitches over 4 inches. And what I love about this, a lot of people have done this, 780 people or so have done this. And I kind of want to do it. I think it's beautiful. So I love how she gives all of these options for carrying multiple yarns together. You can kind of create your own fiber when you carry different yarns together. You can offset one characteristic of a yarn. So if you've got a yarn that doesn't have a lot of structure and you want to use it for that, for, I don't know, color, or it's in your stash and you just need to move it out, you can carry that with something that has more structure, and it will add to the heft of the garment. So you could carry, if you had a beautiful hand-dyed lace weight, something that you wanted to use, you can carry that with, like, let's say it's a lace weight silk, and it doesn't have any structure, and it's certainly not chunky enough to make this garment, but you could carry it with a strand of mohair or a strand of a worsted wool or whatever, and create your own yarn to give you the fabric that you like. And I think that's what's so fun about this particular pattern, because there are just so many opportunities. I've been kind of losing my mind about all of the options. I'm thinking it would be pretty in Santa Cruz with a strand of kid silk haze. You could do it with tweed, with a beautiful tweed haze held single. I think that would be really gorgeous too. And the reason I'm also bringing this up is I think we are going to be doing this as, this is going to be a featured project in the shop. And what I want to share with you is I'm going to give some lucky person a 50 DKK pattern. I'm going to give you this pattern for free. So that'll be my giveaway. So go ahead and post in the comments, post Magnolia. You can see how to spell it, Magnolia, Magnolia. Post that in the comments, and then we will pick our winner. That'll be the last thing that we'll do tonight. So, oh, great, a Magnolia hat. Yeah, she's done a lot of really fun stuff, hasn't she? Super cute stuff, I think. There's a cardigan version and there's a lighter weight version. I just think this one would be such a fun, quick knit that I, kind of want to do it. I think that would be super fun. All right. All the comments coming in. Bring them on. It'll be super fun. And so after I draw, I'm going to ask you to stay on, and if you're the winner, to text me, to put in the comments your Ravelry name so that I can gift that to you right now. Oh, Meredith likes the pullover sport version. Yes, of course she does. Meredith and her crew, they all knit with tiny yarn. Okay, 2 more seconds, and I am going to, all right, let me share my screen. All right, ready, go. Yay! Gwen, didn't you just win something? My goodness, you are a lucky girl. I'll give away 2. Here's another one. We'll do another one. So Gwen will get one. And I'll draw again from the same crew. All right, Mary. Woo, Mary Hype. All right. So Mary and Gwen, post a comment with your Ravelry name in there so that I can give you that freebie, and that'll be super fun. And then we can start thinking about what yarn we want to use. I don't know what I can think of. I'm going to wait. So I hope that this has been fun for you. Next week, we have, I'm going to be talking about the importance of a loving and supportive community. And I think that's huge. So I have a couple locals from from the shop and who are also members of the Club Crazy for You membership site. And we're going to just be talking about our own, knitting community, both in person and on Ravelry and, other things that we do and what we like about those. So I hope that you will join us for that as well. So, all right, Mary, I am waiting for I'll just stay online. Mary, hi. Okay, here we go. I love to knit number 7. And I know what Gwen's is, so I got that. Okay, sweeties, it's been wonderful. Thanks so much for being here, and I'll see you next week. Until then, keep knitting and create something beautiful. See you next time.